Did anyone else have one of those dads that was constantly saying, jump to me and I'll catch you? You're standing on something tall and he's like, just jump, I'll catch you. For some reason, my dad was always doing this. And you're, as a kid, always afraid. You're scared that, I guess, he's not going to catch you. And then when you hesitate, he's like, do you really think I'm not going to catch you? Why are you hesitating? It's like, yeah, I kind of do. I kind of think you might not catch me. And he's constantly like, you've got to be kidding me. I will definitely catch you. Come to me. And then eventually, if this goes on for any length of time, it really is like, I actually don't believe that he will catch me. And in order to prove that I trust my dad, I have to jump, right? This is the only, I can't just say, yeah, Dad, I don't actually think you're going to let me fall, but also I'm too scared to jump. He's going to say, well, what are you scared of? You're scared of falling. Well, if you're not afraid I'm going to let you fall, then why won't you do it, right? And that is the same with our faith. We can't just say, yeah, I believe you're going to catch me, Dad. Yeah, I believe, God, that you're going to save me. Yes, I believe that you are who you say you are and you did what you said you did. I believe all that. And then go on about our business. God is like, prove it to me. If you really believe, then put your life in my hands. That's same as I would be doing if I were to jump to my dad and he wouldn't catch me and I would fall, to my death, as if he was really getting me to jump from something high enough that would happen anyway. But as a kid, that's what you're thinking. So the story of how the Israelites got into the promised land in the first place is the perfect picture of faith and courage and the Christian life. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the first generation of Israelites that had gotten out of Egypt, they're all gone now. Moses is also gone. And Joshua is now the leader, and he's about to take the people into the promised land. And last week we talked about how he sent 2 spies in to check the land out so they knew what it looked like before they got there. Well, these spies have come back now. And the Israelites have started their journey towards the promised land, and they're on the edge of the Jordan River. And in order to get into the land, they're going to have to cross this river. So God comes to Joshua and he says, here's what's going to happen. The priests are going to take up the Ark of the Covenant and they're going to start walking. And when they start walking, the rest of the people need to follow them. Now, normally, the Ark of the Covenant stayed inside the tabernacle. The tabernacle was basically their church, and only the priests went inside of this place, and inside were 2 rooms. The first room had the lampstand and the table with the bread on it and an altar of incense. And then there was this big curtain, and that separated that room from the back room. The first room was called the holy place, and the back room was called the most holy place. And this room only had the Ark of the Covenant in it. And this was basically like a bench. It was a big box, and it had a lid on it. And the lid is called the mercy seat. And inside of this is where they would keep the 10 Commandments. The testimony of God. And so sometimes it's called the Ark of the Testimony or the Ark of the covenant that God made with the people. And so that was inside. And then this seat had 2 cherubim on either side of it, and their wings went over it, and it would cover the mercy seat like this, okay? And God dwelt there between the wings above the mercy seat. And this is where the high priest would go and meet with God once a year and make atonement for the people's sins. And so the Ark of the Covenant, because that is where the Spirit of God met with the people, this Ark was the representation of the presence of God with the people. And normally when they would tear down the tabernacle and they would travel, the Kohathites, which is one of the 3 tribes within the tribe of Levi, they were the ones that would carry this ark. But this time God said, no, I want the priests themselves to carry the ark, because the priests are the representation of God to the people, and the ark is the representation of God's presence. And so this is the representation of God carrying the presence of God in front of the people so that they can see where they're supposed to go. And so they're going to pick this ark up and they're going to carry it. And it says that the people need to remain at least 2,000 cubits away from the ark, which is about 3,000 feet, a little over a half a mile. And so the people need to stay back that far so that they can get a good look so that everybody can see where the ark is traveling, because God says, you've never been this way before. You don't know which way to go. I am with the priests and I'm leading them and they are leading you. So you have to stay back. And so this is all being told to Joshua the day before. And then I'm going to read you Joshua 3 verse 7. This is after God has explained all that to Joshua. He says this. The Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And so if you remember, when Moses led the people out of Egypt, God parted the Red Sea and they walked across on dry ground. Well, he's going to do the same thing with the Jordan River this time. And so God is telling Joshua, he says, hey, the same way that I led the people out of Egypt, I'm going to lead the people into the promised land. And the same way that Moses started his leadership, you're going to start your leadership. And this will exalt you before the people. This miracle that I'm about to do is going to let the people know that I'm with you and they're going to follow you. And this will be confirmation not only to Joshua, but to the people that God is with Joshua. And so Joshua gathers all of the people around and he begins to tell them all that God has told him about following the ark the next day. And then he says this is verse 10. Joshua said, here is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Jebusites. And then skip down to verse 13. He says, this is how you're going to know that God is going to bring you into this land and give it to you. And then in verse 13, he says, when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all of heaven and earth, when they rest in the waters of the Jordan, then the waters of the Jordan will be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above will stand in a big heap. He says, this is how you're going to know that God's going to do what he says that he's going to do. Now, whenever he says the priest bearing the ark of the Lord, that word is Yahweh, the personal name that they have for their God. And then he says, the Lord of all the earth, Adonai. And Adonai means master. So he says, the priest bearing the ark of Yahweh, the Adonai, the master of all the earth. So he's saying God's going to reveal to you that he is the master of the whole earth by stopping the flow of this river upstream and making it stand in a big heap so you can walk across. You're going to see that God is fully in charge of even the rivers. And then you will know that he is God, he is with you, and he's going to be able to do all of the things that he told you he's going to be able to do. And so the next day, these things happen. The priests take up the ark and they begin to travel, and the people wait until they get a little over a half a mile away, and they begin to follow them. And this is verse 15, and it says, as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of water, and then in parenthesis it says, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. So it's saying at this time, whenever they dipped their feet in this overflowing river, this river that is completely full at this time of year, when they dipped their feet in the waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarathon, and those flowing down towards the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off, and the people passed over opposite Jericho. So, the scholars tell us that this city of Adam is about 18 miles away. So as soon as the priests stepped their feet into this overflowing river, 18 miles away, God made the water stop flowing. And they were able to cross on dry ground. Now, this river, the Jordan River, flows into the Salt Sea. And so he says it completely quit flowing into the Salt Sea at this moment, and they were able to walk across. Now, scholars also tell us that this place where the water stopped was probably about the spot where the Jabbok River and the Jordan River converge. And at this place, there are often mudslides, especially at this time of year, because the reason that the banks overflow at this time of the year is it is the time of harvest, and there are lots of spring rains, and also all the snow is melting off of Mount Hermon. And so it's flowing down this mountain, and oftentimes it brings big mudslides with it. As a matter of fact, in 1927, there was a great big mudslide at this exact place, and it kept the water from flowing for 20 hours. And so it's possible that that's what happened at this time, that there was a mudslide. So does that just mean, oh, coincidence, no big deal, God had nothing to do with it? No. If God's in charge of the river, he's also in charge of the snow. He's also in charge of the mudslides. And God made this happen. It's very clear that it's a miracle. It happens at the exact moment that the priests stepped their feet into this overflowing river. And we know that no person has done anything to make this happen. No person stopped up the river, and no person unblocked it to let all the river flow. But God did this the second that they stepped their feet in the water. God made it stop, whether it was with a mudslide or whatever it was. He dammed up the river. And then we'll find out in a minute, the second that they took their feet out of the river, the water started flowing again. That's not a coincidence. Even if it is a natural occurrence, God is in charge of all the natural occurrences, and God made this happen of his own free will at the exact moment that he wanted it to happen, and he freed the water to flow again at the exact moment he wanted that to happen. It's not a coincidence. So I'm going to read you a couple of passages that talk about how God is in charge of these things. The first one is Job 37, 6 through 13. Verse 6 says, for to the snow, he says, fall on the earth, likewise to the downpour, his mighty downpour. And then skip down to verse 10, and he says, by the breath of God, ice is given, and the broad waters are frozen fast. He loads the thick cloud with moisture. The clouds scatter his lightning. They turn around and around by his guidance to accomplish all that he commanded them on the face of the habitable earth. Whether for correction or for his land or for his love, he causes it to happen. So God can bring about these things for any number of reasons, but it's always him. says that the breath of God makes ice. It's like he blows and everything turns to ice. He loads the thick clouds with moisture, and then he tells them when to drop their rain. Everything he is in charge of. Psalm 47:15-18 says, he sends out his command to the earth. His word runs swiftly. He gives snow like wool. He scatters frost like ashes. He hurls down his crystals of ice like crumbs. Who can stand before his cold? He sends out his word and he melts them. He makes his wind blow and the waters flow. All this is so poetic. It's so fun to read how they describe what God is doing with the snow and the rain and all of what the secular world calls Mother Nature. This is God. This is what he does. And then lastly, Jesus does this in the New Testament. In Luke 8:22-25, there's a story about how he is on the boat with the disciples and he's below sleeping, and there comes a storm. And it says, this is verse 23, it says, a windstorm came down on the lake and the boat was filling with water. And so they went down and they woke Jesus and they said, Master, Master, we're going to die. And he got up, and it says he rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and they ceased, and there was calm. And then the disciples are like, what just happened? It says they marveled and said to one another, who then is this that he commands even the winds and the waters, and they obey him? God is in charge of the wind and the water and the mud and the snow, all of the things of the earth. That's why he's called the master of the earth, the Adonai of the earth. He's proving that to his people right now in this story. Very, very